Okay. Um, Welcome to the Eric Dollard live interview today. This is a production of A&P Electronic Media. My name is Peter Lindemann, and I'll be the interviewer and host today for today's telecast. The first thing we'd like to do, because there's sometimes a lot of problems with these systems, this is the first time we're using GoToMeeting. If you can see the image and if you can hear my voice clearly without echoes or anything else, if you would just put a little note in the chat and let us know if you're having any problems. If you're not having any problems, if you can see everything clearly, and if you can hear my voice without echo, then please don't make a comment. And so what we'll try and do is work out the technical problems as best we can early. So in the meantime, I would like to just give you a little bit of an outline of what we're hoping to accomplish today. First of all, we will be talking about Eric's recent conference lecture at the Bedini-Lindemann Science and Technology Conference approximately 1 month ago. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that and that lecture's relationship to a new book that Eric has developed, which is the complete communication on that subject matter. So we'll be talking a little bit about those things, and we'll be taking questions on the content of the lecture as well. We'd also like to address some of the other recent allegations and controversies that have been swarming around in the last month, and just let you know where you can find the information on all of these things. And if you have any questions or if you have any doubts about what the reality of that situation is, or you can put a question in the chat, and you can have Eric answer your question directly so that your mind can be put at ease as to what the real situation is. So I'd like to introduce Eric. He's obviously the honored guest of this interview. And also here handling all the technicals in the background is Aaron Murakami. And so we're about ready to begin. So Aaron, are there any problems with the technical that people are asking about?
No, everybody's saying that they can hear it loud and clear. Video's coming through okay, and so also, if they want to raise their hands when you do open up for questions, they can also ask by audio.
Okay.
One at a time.
Right. So here's the situation we have. If you have an audio feed for your computer, what we can do is if you put a question in the chat, and we think it's a good question that everybody would be interested in the answer to, you can just raise your hand in the chat, and then we can turn on your microphone so that you can actually ask the question in an audio form live on this webinar. So the first thing I'd like to start the interview. The conference was a really amazing experience for those who were there, and the final presentation was Eric speaking for almost 3 hours on the topic of 4-quadrant representation of electricity. And this goes back to Tesla's original conception of how electricity operated in these systems. And he and I were having a little conversation a while ago, and I brought up the quote by Tesla from 1893, where he said that he believed that it would be the greatest day in human history when we actually understood what electricity is. And certainly he was on the quest for that discovery, and a lot of other people were. And can you just make a few comments about that situation and where we are with using electricity today? Obviously, electricity isn't electrons moving down wires.
Well, nobody really cares what electricity is anymore or wants to study it. So corporations and the industry got what they wanted out of it, so now it's kind of just all abandoned. So what I'm trying to do is to pick up the pieces and get interest in electrical science going again. Of course, Tesla's the center of all this, but you can't just say that Tesla came up with this and that. In Tesla's day, it was a whole movement that was started by Michael Faraday many decades before Tesla even got started on this. In Tesla's day, it was you had J.J. Thomson
exactly.
and other lesser-known people that were all writing papers on this and doing experiments and gave us basically all the science and technology we have today, but its origins are all forgotten, and its way of presentation and development has all been debased and perverted. So my aim is to bring everything back to the original point again. Electricity has specific geometric patterns and things that can be very easily understood, so my lecture was to try to get that idea across to people that don't really know a lot about electricity by explaining it in analogs and archetypes and things like that, and getting very heavy into the history of where all this came from.
Right, so the lecture is really an excellent place for almost anybody with any interest in the topic to start. It's pretty much what will be covered in the book, but there's a lot less of the math and a lot less of the technical details of that. So Eric has produced a tremendous kind of overview for the general audience on the nature of electricity and its deep roots in the natural world, and how all of the people who were really involved at the beginning of this, these people didn't think of themselves as scientists as much as just discoverers of natural principles and natural philosophers and these types of things back in the 1800s. The idea of being a scientist was not really an interesting idea. And studying how nature behaved and even understanding the underlying philosophy of nature, which is where you get the idea of being a natural philosopher, that was like the pinnacle of knowledge. If you really understood not only what nature did, but how nature did it and why nature did it, then you really understood the philosophy of nature. And this is where all of these astonishing people like Tesla and J.J. Thomson and Charles Steinmetz and others, they really kind of teased the truth out of these hidden corners of behavior, because electricity as we use it today is not actually found in nature, other than it's inherently available, but it never shows up quite this way. That's pretty much right, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Tesla kind of considered it unnatural form.
An unnatural form?
Yeah, unnatural form, but this is what we got.
Mm-hmm. So
that's not to say that there aren't other possibilities or things to be discovered in electricity.
Right.
So that's why Tesla came up with that remark, is when that understanding was achieved, then it would be a great thing for mankind. But then, would it be? Has it been so far? Great. That can be questioned.
Yeah, so far it's been used as in a very superficial way to power up convenience, and as long as people pay the power bill and enjoy the convenience, then the power company really isn't interested in us knowing anything more about it.
Yeah, and also the engineering is getting real sloppy and dangerous. Because the original knowledge and understandings and workmanship are all disappearing. So it's just like we were discussing earlier about the interference and all that, is the system's becoming basically out of control.
And
no one really understands how to put these things together anymore, or how to configure the transformers, or the safety requirements is all gone. So basically, from the sociological standpoint, what I'm presenting here and talking and write about is of actually no interest whatsoever to society.
Yeah, and that's a dangerous condition we're in. Would you not say?
Yes.
Yes.
And
Sometimes you head for the hills.
Yeah, when you start analyzing waveforms and signals like I do, and see what's going on inside the Earth, you find out that there's this large body of electricity that's becoming more and more out of control inside the Earth from all these aberrant power systems that are going into construction and installation, and it's a danger to the public.
So let's go back to the roots of all this. You were saying in your lecture that Tesla's vision of the real way of producing and transmitting electricity down wires was a 4-pole system, not a 3-phase system.
He originally started off 4-phase, but then a special transformer bank was developed to go from this 4-phase system to 3-phase for long-distance transmission because it utilized less metal.
Just less wires? It just 3 wires instead of 4 wires?
Even normally less wires means bigger wires, but it was found that 3-phase uses the least amount of metal of all polyphase systems, and there really isn't an adequate explanation for that. But somehow the geometry works out that 3-phase is the way to go about it, but the natural form of electricity is 4-phase.
4-phase.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the lecture being called the 4-quadrant theory, or the four sections of
everything that manifests in electricity is related to 4 poles.
4 poles.
We're taught in school that it's 2 poles, and electricity is the flow of electrons and wires, and all those things are not really correct, and then they build up such a powerful mind virus that you can't get out of that.
Right.
Once you start going into more advanced studies of electricity, you have all these, it's kind of like believing in Santa Claus. You're taught about Santa Claus, and then one day your parents tell you that they lied to you, and there is no Santa Claus. And that's the most important lesson that you learn in your life, is there's not only Santa Claus, but there's other things, like electrons.
Right. So, so the idea is that what this lecture is about is to help you understand the roots in the natural world of where electricity comes from, what it is, and how it can behave, and a lot of the other things that have been discovered about it by Tesla and Steinmetz and some of the earlier researchers, which Eric has studied and is probably the greatest living proponent of, and probably knows more about these things than anybody else alive, certainly than anyone else I've met. And so if we're going to bring back or even salvage the electrical system for what any kind of benefit it can have for society, we're going to have to know these things, and there are going to have to be people who understand these things as well as Eric. And so that's what this lecture is about, to begin to give you a good introduction into the material. And
I should point out that actually, the 4-quadrant theory is a highly mathematical subject. It's pure mathematics. In fact, somebody, I was reading a comment on the internet thing that I write on that says, what I'm talking about is, he referred to it as postgraduate mathematics work. So how am I going to explain this to a public that doesn't understand any of this stuff? And we really don't know anything about electricity at all. So what I'm doing in this lecture and the book is just to kind of lay the geometry and the groundwork for the whole thing, so you can get an idea of the overall shape of electrical situations and the interactions. But again, it's a PhD level mathematical topic, so it's going to have that abstract nature that some people just aren't going to get.
Right. Yeah. But in that sense, building a V8 engine from scratch is a PhD level engineering thing too, and that doesn't mean people can't have a general understanding of how an internal combustion engine works.
That's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, what we're seeing is that society's use of electricity is obviously just exploding. It's using electricity in ways that were never even thought of 20 or 30 years ago.
Well, the problem is the way it's being used also is very disruptive to the transmission system.
Right.
And that's become a major complication right now. And unfortunately, the electrical system is being rewired for reasons unknown in a way that enhances and aggravates the problem.
And that's something that Eric is going to be talking about in a future publication in detail. He hopes actually to model all of these issues and problems and come up with a very, very clear thesis on what's going on with the power grid. But one thing I wanted to go back over, I had the privilege of being in the edit studio with the film engineer that we brought in to film Eric's lecture, and having an opportunity to go through the material very carefully. We really did almost no editing on it at all, and but going through the whole thing very carefully and just seeing the whole thing with the slides on the screen and Eric on the screen, so that there's no distractions in the room or anything else. I was absolutely astonished at how much I learned that I didn't know about electricity. And one of the things that you talked about was how the four waves create what you call this big mechanical shaft of rotation down the wires.
Yeah, it operates actually like a drive shaft, except there's no apparent physical movement.
Exactly, and so this is one of the concepts that I had never imagined, that electricity, the way Tesla conceived it, actually had and functioned as this large spiraling magnetic field that was going down, and that the rotation was actually inherent in the electricity itself.
Exactly.
Yeah, and see, we're all taught that alternating current is just this fluctuation of electricity, and the direct current is just this direct movement of electricity, and no one's talking about this gigantic rotational phenomena in electricity. And
yeah, that's my point. Is alternating current's been misrepresented as a reversal pulsation, and actually it's a shadow of a rotation.
That's just one. If you look at just one part of it, it looks like an oscillation.
Yeah, it looks like an oscillation, but that's just taking a shadow of the whole thing.
Right.
It's like the illusion, that the sun rotates around the Earth.
Right. That's a perspective issue.
It's a projection. It's not what's actually going on.
Right.
So Tesla did was initiate a magnetic vortex at the sending end, and then that connected through a polyphase transmission system where the magnetism actually spirals as it propagates the velocity of light down the power line, and then when that goes into the magnetic receiving device, the vortex removes the motor. And if you hold on to the motor or do something, that wave chokes all the way back to the generator, and the whole thing actually works like a rotational coupling. The power can actually bounce back and forth just like it can on a drive shaft. Like when you miss the clutch or something in your car, the thing goes into an oscillation. These are things you have to deal with in large power systems, because they will go into violent oscillations, like screwed up with the clutch, and knock everything dead. That's, these big blackouts usually result in some kind of oscillation that got out of control.
And so these are very so the mechanical analogs to those things are very accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're dealing with the exact same forces, the longitudinal and transverse components, and the propagations, and it's a branch in engineering that it's called dynamics. So the formulations and the geometries and the equations are identical for all different types of dynamics. The electrical is one of the hardest to deal with because it's not accessible like a physical drive shaft.
Yeah, you can't see
So when you see those three big cables up on the towers with the insulators that are 6 or 7 feet long, spiraling in the space between those wires and around them, moving at 90%, at least 95% the velocity of light, is the power of 150 locomotives, full power, lugging up some grade. And there's no evidence of it other than the wires are slightly pushed apart in the process when the wave passes through. Otherwise, that's how much power is there, and there's no way to physically perceive it, but it's quite real. and it exists in that form. It's a rotational vortex.
And because it's not just oscillating back and forth. There is an actual flow of power all the way through.
Continuous flow of power does not pulsate like you're talking about alternating current. It's continuous flow of power.
Right.
It's constantly changing direction.
Right.
As it propagates, so you get a spiral down the line.
You get this.
Yeah.
This
Right.
spiral vortex going down the line. Exactly. And so that was made just crystal clear to me, and I had never really heard anybody discuss that as clearly as you did in the lecture. There were just a whole lot of other aspects to the lecture that I was amazed at.
Well, I did the thing which is a forbidden sin in the science and technology world. Is the first third of it is purely metaphysical.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought actually that was brilliant. I was a little bit concerned when I kind of heard that you were going to talk that way, but it did not come across as mystical or anything else. It came across very, very directly related to the topic, and I was actually amazed at how coherently all of those themes were woven together.
Well, that's how all this came about. So, none of this just got hatched up.
Right.
And it all starts with Pythagoras, 500 to 600 BC.
Right.
That's where the groundwork was laid. So you can't really understand this stuff unless you go all the way back to the beginning and understand how it all came about. And electricity is not just somebody's notion or something that was concocted in somebody's mind while they were high on something or whatever. It was already there.
Right. Any lightning storm will show you that it's already there.
Even when there is no lightning, it's already there.
Right.
Massive quantities of it.
Right.
No one even knows how much.
Right. So Tesla used to say that electricity behaves like an incompressible fluid, and that the Earth is filled with it. He said that in an article in 1900. You've looked a lot at the energy in the Earth, and what's your idea of that at this point?
Well, at times there's massive rivers of electricity flowing in the interior of the Earth, particularly before large earthquakes. So I figured out a way to tap into one particular flow that happens before large earthquakes, and it has produced a successful two-gate advanced seismic warning system. Mm-hmm. But of course that all got destroyed, and I don't know how to possibly put all that back together again.
Uh-huh.
That's the problem, the equipment and the time and and climbing all the poles and stringing all the wire. I mean, I can do all that again. I kind of have to in order to keep healthy. But statistically, before this decade is out, California is going to get blasted. And I no longer have a station to observe all of that stuff. Uh-huh. But, for example, one of the earthquakes, conveniently enough, was the epicenter was there at Landers. I wasn't at the station at the time, but other people were, and they described, the high-frequency waves and the other stuff the equipment was picking up, and the surges of current were so high in the area that the older color TV tubes used to have an iron shadow mask towards the front of the tube, and you had to demagnetize that all the time. And they had coils wound in the TV to do that.
Right, the debouncers, right?
Yeah. So one of the people that helped me build all this there by getting the parts and stuff, he's really top-notch electronics technician and engineer in the area, works for the Marine Corps and all that. He analyzed all this material, and he was a TV repairman at the time. And the surges of magnetism from the electricity flowing in the ground had permanently magnetized several television sets in the town of Yucca Valley, and they could not be depolarized. And he sent the tubes back to the manufacturer to be analyzed and the whole thing, and they'd never seen anything like it before.
Wow.
So that's a current of about 5 million amps flowing in the ground.
Wow.
So one of the
and that's completely naturally generated by the
completely naturally.
process.
And then during large magnetic storms, Jerry Vassilaudis in his real compendium probably put together the best collection of material on telluric and earth currents, actual reports of telegraph operators And this stuff's going on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it comes and goes. It's just like the weather. It can be quiet, and then it can build up. When there's low solar activity, then, you know, it tends to be low until an earthquake comes about. And then all of a sudden it builds up to enormous magnitudes. I picked up ionospheric scatter from electrically from the earthquake in Japan 2 days before it happened.
Wow. So that brings us to the possibility. Are there any questions that anyone would like to ask Eric at this time?
Let's see. There's ones that are typed in. You want to do some of those first?
Yeah. Let's hear some of them.
Let's see questions. Okay. You just read it out?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is coming from somebody named Prodigal Wizard.
Okay, Prodigal Wizard.
Okay, for someone wishing to pursue the work of Tesla and others alike, would it be best to primarily study physics or engineering?
Engineering. Stay away from physics.
Yeah, engineering has always looked at the practical, what happens, where the rubber meets the road. That's engineering. And physics has really strayed off into theoretical kind of la-la land, very, very disconnected from the realities.
Actually, physics is an antagonistic religion. It's best. Those people always want to destroy Tesla's work and his ideas because it's just horrifying to them. It's a denial of their entire existence. So the best thing, if in engineering, you're going to have to deal with a more practical, experimental level. You're going to be dealing with tangible things, and then the books written by engineers like Steinmetz and what have you. But ultimately, you have to remember, I've been studying this stuff since I was 6 years old, and now I'm 61. So it's not like any massive understanding is going to come about in a 4-week period.
Right, and so the idea of studying this stuff to get a degree so that you can think of yourself as an engineer, and at which point you'll go out and get a job and all that kind of stuff, you still won't know anything about what's going on, because here we're looking at a guy who's been studying this stuff for the last 55 years, and he's still learning about all of these things. Nature's secrets are vast, and this is a lifetime study, not
also the lifetimes of the people before me.
Exactly.
That led to the understanding that I could grasp.
Exactly.
So you're in my lecture and the book as I get into those primary people and what motivated them and how they came about these ideas and how horribly their ideas were received and harshly dealt with and the misery in their lives, and because that's what seems to come out of all this, and I can attest to all of that. Mm-hmm. Is if you're going to get involved in this to the level I'm involved in it, is the tale of Prometheus will be true.
You see, what the big elephant in the room is that physics and the bankers have overlaid this economic model onto every type of knowledge, whereby everything has been reduced to the value of a plastic picnic fork that you use once and throw away. And nature, of course, reuses things all the time, and they just don't want us to understand how nature really behaves and how things really are connected.
Well, they have a pathological psychosis where they actually hate nature. That's the problem, is they despise it.
Right.
So you have to get into the writings of Wilhelm Reich. He really discusses that matter, how humans have separated themselves from life, and that's what's causing all the diseases.
Right. So definitely pursue engineering. Definitely pursue hands-on anything that you can actually run an experiment and test for yourself to see for yourself whether what's being reported to you is true or not.
I would say the best thing to do is to get a hold of Faraday's experimental researches and start there.
Exactly.
Read his researches, his ideas, and do his experiments. Exactly. That's the best place to start.
Right. Any of these things, even Wilhelm Reich, read the books from the people who did it, duplicate their experiments, and start there. read the geniuses and duplicate their work. Don't read books about them by others, because most people are clueless when it comes to analysis.
There's one really amazing character in all this, is Dr. Lindemann.
Oh yes,
Gustav
Le Bon.
Yeah, Gustav Le Bon, and you read his books, and the experiments are so simple and fundamental. There's no massive $1 million laboratories, and the stuff is so crude that I would be embarrassed to see something like that on my workbench and say that I made that thing. But nevertheless, his ideas, were incredible, and he even actually managed to duplicate some of Isaac Newton's alchemical experiments, which of course will send any physicist into a screeching rage. Even the mere mention of alchemy. But Newton didn't think like that.
No, Newton was not a scientist. He was a natural philosopher and an alchemist. He wrote over 1 million words on alchemy, and all of those writings were essentially sequestered by the Royal Society of London after his death, and they didn't actually come out until there was a gigantic auction at Christie's in 1937, where all of Newton's writings on alchemy came out. And it was absolutely, everybody was freaked out when all of that came out. But clearly, he wrote far more on alchemy than any other subject.
Yeah, that was one of his main interests. Newton's kind of a funny character. So he was an intense paranoid, a bit of a schizophrenic, and really just could not work with his contemporaries.
Right. He was very much a loner. Wanted to stay alone.
Well, but Tesla did too. But nevertheless, Newton really was the biggest suppressor of his own work, and that's unfortunate. Yeah. And he just kept getting this notion that other people's ideas came from him, and they stole from him, and he was in constant vicious fights with all the other people, and that just really did a lot of damage to the whole thing.
Right.
So
let's take another question.
Okay, this comes from Devin Drake. The question is it your opinion that Tesla was extracting energy from the vortex flow around the Earth? Is this the same energy, possibly what makes tornadoes and hurricanes spin? Is there a tendency for this energy to accumulate and synchronize?
Well, Tesla doesn't really talk about any of that. He wanted to extract energy from the environment, to use his own words.
He used the term the natural medium.
The natural medium.
Yeah, he used that term a lot.
So there's an electrical thing that goes on with the tornadoes and hurricanes. It's very close to the earthquakes. In fact, hurricanes and earthquakes produce similar signals, and tornadoes and volcanoes produce similar signals. But my means to analyze that are no longer existent, and I didn't really get all that together, but that's what I noticed from my observations. There is an energy flow of some kind that generates radio frequency signals that transmit for thousands of miles in the audio, what's called the ELF to VLF band. But ultimately, I can't answer if Tesla, because Tesla never really told much about what he was doing.
Okay. Sorry, Devin. That great question, kind of beyond the scope of the interview here.
Okay. Here's this other question from Prodigal Wizard. Can you expand on what you mean by displacement current?
Displacement current is the dielectrics reaction to a change in field density. So the energy rebalancing itself causes a current to flow, but it's an ether current. It's not an electronic current.
Okay. Let's
so
see.
Hopefully that's not too technical. When you ask a specific question like that, there is a technical answer, and Eric just gave it.
What's important about the displacement current is it's a current without electrons. The question is, does it or does it not produce a magnetic field? That's an extremely important question. The Maxwellians say that it does. Tesla's work says it doesn't. That would determine the whole reality of what's going on with electromagnetism and electrostatic waves. And what Tesla is working on is to determine if a displacement current produces a magnetic field in an experiment. I'd like to do that myself, but I don't really get those opportunities because I'm not allowed to hold on to my equipment that long.
Another question?
Okay, a question from Abbas Hachem. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but the question is, it was said that the Tesla tower propagated energy through the earth and not the air. Is this still true?
Well, exactly, even by Tesla's own word. The terminal on the top is just a reflecting capacitance to send the wave back down, and then it goes inside the earth. So Tesla built almost a 300-foot cube of grounding underneath that tower, which is still there to this day, but the access to it is denied.
Okay. So yes, the Tesla's quote wireless system was a ground propagation
system. It's a telluric system.
Right, ground propagation system.
Okay. This is a question from Tim Gross. Professor Dollard has mentioned about an analog electrical computer producing equivalent phenomena as a real situation. Does he think some kind of analog computer network system would be the best way to resume true basic research in electricity?
Yeah, it allows you to synthesize the waveforms that are said that don't exist or haven't been analyzed yet. And the analog device will actually duplicate the effects of the Tesla transformers without the windings and similar, complications. Because you have control over all the elements, you can produce a mathematical function precisely. So that is, as soon as I have the means to get going on anything again, that's going to be one of my first, lines of research is to get back into that.
Great question.
Okay, here's a question from Emery Engin or Engin. If a regular compass can be used to observe the magnetic component of electricity, what can be used to observe the dielectric component of electricity?
You would have to have a device constructed like a compass, but the needle would have to be made out of something with a dielectric constant of at least 1,000.
How about like an electroscope or something like that?
No, electroscope won't show direction.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so if you have like the material they make these super ceramic capacitors out of, and you make a small rod of that,
like barium titanate or something like that.
And then charge it somehow. See, the thing is the needle in the compass is not only permeable, but it's also charged with magnetism. So you have to have like an electret.
Electret on a pivot.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, so that would be the answer. And a device that looked like a compass, except instead of being a magnetized pointer, it would be an electret.
Right.
Electrostatically.
Instead of magnetically charged, it would be dielectrically charged, and instead of being magnetically permeable, it would be dielectrically permeable.
Right.
So iron has a permeability of 1,000, so you would have to get a dielectric that has that same kind of ratio,
right,
compared to free space. So it's going to be one of these super ceramics. And then you have to figure out a way to polarize it. Some of them will hold the charge without any metal terminals. So
right.
There's so many formulas and species available of that stuff that I'm sure there's something out there that will work perfectly.
Right. So, Great question.
Okay, this is a question from Sebastian Bowles. Mr. Dollard, do you consider the Tesla transformer to be the most important apparatus in replicating Tesla's work? So if anyone wanted to try to get into experimenting with Tesla's patents, is it essential that they get the Tesla transformer built right?
That's the key to all of Tesla's work, is that transformer. That's why he was able to advance beyond everybody else, because his devices were so highly perfected. That transformer serves as a transformer from electromagnetism to the dielectric field, and you have to make that transformation before you can begin to study the dielectric field.
Okay, let's see. Here's a question from Philip Hobbs. Is the solar flares the reason why the UK power network is getting so many faults?
The solar flares are pretty dead right now. In fact, actually, it's kind of scary how dead the sun's getting. So it might be something else going on there, bad engineering, or maybe it's just overly susceptible to the solar activity. It's not the solar activity directly that causes the disruption of the power systems. It's the telluric currents that the solar flare generates that disrupt the power system by getting up to the transformer neutrals.
Okay.
So one of the things that Eric and I were talking about today was how the system, the high voltage and low voltage neutrals have been mixed here in the United States, and maybe that's part of the problem that he's seeing.
Yeah, that makes the system much more susceptible to nuclear EMP and telluric surges.
Right.
It invites it.
Right. So it makes it's destabilizing.
Destabilizing the system.
The system.
Yeah.
So there may well be a reason you're seeing what you're seeing, and we're without a significant observation on site, we wouldn't know for sure. But there may well be very good reasons, and your data may be accurate.
Well, it sounds interesting, and there should be more material found out and presented on that subject. That's
exactly.
Important.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a question from Boris Jovanovic. Can Eric build a device that provides free energy, and what he personally thinks is the probability of him doing that? 10, 60, or 90%? What's all needed for that? Thank you, and hi everybody. Boris from Norway.
I don't really have any perfected free energy device. In fact, I've had to distance myself from even talking about that idea because of all the negative energy it brings along. But I have seen, as Peter and I and Michael Knotts and Chris Carson did a demonstration of a rotating apparatus, which I think is very well known about now on the videos that have gotten out, what are termed as the Borderland videos, and the device had every appearance of invalidating the law of conservation of energy. There was no relationship between the energy in and the energy out, and there was one point where, under worst case circumstances, with all the errors subtracted in the favor against us, we determined the machine had 108% efficiency. As an electrical device with that much leakage and resistance and windage and hysteresis and all that, it should have never operated above 70% efficiency. So
or 50. It was a plastic prototype, for God's sake. So it was.
And then I have this voltage converter thing in my car that was made in World War II that bounces two capacitors between each other to make 12 and 24 volts, and there have been times that I can't turn it off. And I have noticed that it will run one of the small toy radio devices in the car, a small unit in radio, probably pulls maybe 200 milliamps, and the thing has seemed to power it. But as far as, anything that I can take to LA Department of Water and Power, and, we put up a building and bolt it to the floor, it's not happening.
Yeah.
And they would love to have that, but it's just not there. And so I'm only approaching the theoretical standpoint. My idea was to lay a mathematical basis for this so that from that mathematical and theoretical understanding, somebody could come up with something that does produce what I call energy synthesis. The other thing, which is an obvious break in the energy loop, is this hydrogen process where people are using radio frequency waves and dealing with water dielectrically rather than conductively, and instead of breaking it apart by electrolysis, they're breaking it apart by some kind of molecular dielectric dissociation, and no energy is required to separate the water, and then when you recombine the hydrogen and oxygen, it's a thermodynamic process. So the law of conservation of energy is violated in that situation, and numerous people have accomplished that. So in that sense, that's the only so-called free energy I know about, and I would pursue people, if they want to follow a course that's probably going to lead to something that works, I'd go that route.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, Eric, is that Tesla never said that his devices, created energy.
Tesla was an absolute adherent to the law of conservation of energy.
Absolutely. So, but he was also a complete adherent to the idea that nature was just loaded with so much energy that could be tapped.
Well, to take it from a practical standpoint, is the Earth is rotating at 1,000 miles an hour.
At the equator.
Yeah,
Right.
so that means that basically we're all moving, 1,000 miles an hour through space. Everything in this room is moving 1,000 miles an hour through
Right.
space. And then there's a 25,000 mile an hour component. as the Earth moves around the sun. And then there's a 100,000-mile-an-hour component as the solar system moves through space. So if you take any object that's in this room, you know, the button on my shirt, okay, this thing moving at 250,000 miles an hour, if it hit you in the side of the head, you'd be feeling funny if you even had a head left, or if anything in the neighborhood was even left.
Right.
So Tesla's aim was to figure out how to extract the latent energy that's
Right.
intense, and it's all around us.
Right. He said that we would hook our machines to the wheelwork of nature. Not that we would create energy out of nothing, but that there was so much energy available in the natural world that siphoning a little bit of it off to run our machines was not going to slow down nature at all. And that so what's important for you in your quest for a free energy machine is specifically stop looking in the wrong places. Don't wait for somebody to come up with some little plate that converts tachyons to light LEDs or something like that. That's all nonsense. There is just vast amounts of energy everywhere, and there's lots of things available to tap into it.
But I do believe that energy synthesis is possible, and was stated as such in the 1890s, a American Institute of Electrical Engineers meeting with Tesla present, Steinmetz present, Professor William Anthony was there. They had quite a party, and Anthony was the MC of the thing, and at the end he stated that within a year they really felt that they were going to have some kind of energy synthesis process available.
Basically, that they would have a free electricity. That they use those terms.
Yeah, a self-sustaining electrical system is the way they looked at it. Because after the mathematics of Steinmetz, there's a lot of implications there.
Correct.
And that's why GE jokingly said they gave Steinmetz permission to create electricity from the square root of -1. And that basically is the centerpiece of my whole lecture.
Right, and that comes right back to the lecture that Eric just gave a month ago. Yeah, but the idea that you can create a device that looks like it's a machine that produces electricity seemingly from nothing doesn't mean that that's what it is. It's like the shaft of power that's going down the wires. You can't actually see that. The fact is that the electricity is available in nature. We're not creating it out of nothing. And just because the box might be able to be connected to appliances that we might want to power doesn't mean that we've actually created the electricity out of nothing. It's still the box is embedded in the natural world, and it's interacting with all of these forces.
That's the way Tesla looked at it.
Exactly. So, any other?
Yeah, there's actually quite a few questions. It's about 12 to noon.
Great.
Okay, however long we want to go. There are questions regarding the recent happenings.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to go into any of that yet, or.
Well, we can move into that if we want to take some questions.
Well, let's go for a few more technical ones.
Yeah.
That's kind of.
Okay. Okay, here's a question from John Capoletti. If the magnetic field represents a flow of energy along its field lines, like a spiraling current around a wire, does the dielectric field represent a flow of energy along its own straight lines?
It's within its lines. The magnetic is around in its lines, but the dielectric is within its lines. That's where the idea of counter space comes through. So it's a flow in counter space, but it's more of a stress. Magnetism is considered an actual flow or circulation, and dielectric is considered a stress. But if you alter that stress, then you get displacement currents. So there is a propagation. So when there's a change in potential, that change in potential has to propagate, but how that propagates is an unknown. That has never been resolved. That was the world of Tesla, and Tesla never created equations or wrote books. So it takes us back to original idea of displacement current with Maxwell and using that as a transmission media. So the flow in the dielectric field would have to be a result of variation, but the flow in magnetism is inherent in the process of magnetism itself.
Okay. You were trying to take an audio question? So that works.
I think we're doing fine.
Well, okay, we'll
Yeah.
just go with these. Okay, let's see.
So probably got 4 hours worth of questions
Yeah.
by now.
Let's see. Okay, this is another question from Tim Gross. Are there any plans for a versor and symbolic operations course to deprogram those of us who have been trained to think in calculus?
That's what my whole lecture is about.
That's what the lecture's about, and that's what
And
the
the
book to
book.
follow.
Yeah.
Is that course.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then as far as learning the basics of electrical theory, the Lone Pine writings are the place to begin.
And we'll have those republished shortly.
Okay, here's a, let's see. Here's a question from Steve McKinnon. Have you done any research in John Keeley and his study of vibratory physics?
Not a lot, because there really doesn't seem to be a lot of material available. So instead, I went back to Helmholtz. That's who Tesla studied, was Hermann von Helmholtz.
Okay. Here's a question from Nanya B. What is the highest COP coefficient of performance available from circuits available in the public domain that you know about?
I have no knowledge of any of that.
Yeah, right now, electrically, the COP of circuits just coming out. We've got COPs of close to 2 coming out with lighting controls and motor controls from Flyback Incorporated. Those things are just starting to hit the market now. They've got circuits that will power any inductive load and return the inductive collapse for reuse. So these things are coming. So COP electrical circuits with COP above 1 are about to hit the market, but they're they're not here yet.
Here's a question from Simon Davies. My question, does Eric recommend building a scaled down TMT for 1860 KC? And what was the exact end operating frequency with extra coil?
So that'd be the Tesla.
Well, I picked 1860 because that's the 100th harmonic of the Alexanderson system in Bolinas, which was 18.6. 1860 is a licensable frequency. All you have to do is get a ham radio license. It operates in what's called the 160 meter band, which is beyond the availability of hams to use electromagnetically because the antenna structures are too massive electromagnetically. So I suggested that as a ham radio starting point in telluric transmission and put out a lot of stuff on the internet already about that.
Okay. Here's a couple questions about Gustav Le Bon, wondering how his name is spelled.
Le Bon is capital L-E, capital B-O-N.
Okay. Let's see. Okay. This is a question from Adam Bull. Can Eric talk about the 1917 global readjustment campaign of radio and the multiple loaded flat top antennas longitudinal wave which disappeared post 1917, and what part did Marconi might have played in using the possibly faster than light wave technology of Nikola Tesla, which he claimed could move regardless of distance?
Yeah, that's a very lengthy and complicated question. That's why what I call my RCA book is coming out.
Yeah, that's all addressed in there, isn't it?
And I gave 2 lectures to the San Francisco Tesla Society on this matter that took me months to assemble, and they censored them.
So we're going to try and
so what I can say is, judging from the emission patterns are Marconi's antennas, which are basically an extremely bastardized version of the Tesla system. The radiation patterns indicate that the antennas were not transmitting electromagnetically. The Alexanderson antenna further tuned out the electromagnetic component to satisfy the patent office and the powers to be. He falsely claimed that it was electromagnetic, but then in his technical and theoretical statements, it had no resemblance to anything electromagnetic at all. In the RCA book, and some of this stuff's already come out. I think John Polakowski just released all the handwritten part of that book several months ago, where the complete calculations for the Bolinas, Alexanderson, and Marconi antenna were developed there in black and white, and they show that the electromagnetic component is so insignificant that it's not even worth considering. The heat losses and other things overpower the electromagnetic. So they were not using electromagnetic process. The thing that really tripped off the whole ban and all the complications is the Navy just finally got tired of being ripped off by all DeForest and Marconi, and they wanted a working Tesla system, and they couldn't get a working Tesla system. They just got junk, things that didn't work. When World War I came about, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, produced one of his first snaky political moves. This is why the Secretary of the Navy was absent. He colluded, and the Navy outlawed radio. You were not allowed to own any radio parts or antennas or anything. Outlawed the whole thing, froze all the patents, and then RCA was formed out of General Electric and the United States Navy to be the patent holder to stop all of the endless patent suits, to stop people from getting ripped off by things that didn't work. The jamming and the interference of everybody monkeying around with this and that had just created an impossible mess. So the Navy basically just put a stop to the whole thing, and unfortunately threw the Navy out with the bathwater and screwed themselves out of Tesla. I don't know if they realize that to this day, but they screwed themselves out of Tesla, and they created RCA, and then Sarnoff, Marconi's operating manager, gained control of the corporation and beat every radio inventor and television inventor into the ground thereafter. But I can't complain because Sarnoff's company was my patron and provided me with all the facilities and knowledge and materials I needed for my research. So, but it's bad in one phase, it is good in another. But then when Sarnoff died, that ended everything, and now everybody got a mess.
Okay. Next question is from Mike Goldman. Let's see here. Let's see. Question. Okay. Let's see. From Mike Goldman, would you consider making an analog computer kit for people to purchase and support your work and learn hands-on how to build and use dielectric circuits?
Yeah, that would be a possibility, but I'm not really at that point right now. I'm struggling just to, even do anything.
It would probably be easier to, to put out a downloadable book that would teach you what to buy and how to build it yourself.
Well, there are handwritten chapters at the end of the RCA book that actually give constructible networks made out of real coils and capacitors. So it would just be a matter of getting those size capacitors and those size coils. There's some people in the energetic forum that have been fooling around with this. It's not that hard to do. For me to be building kits and all that, right now I'm struggling, particularly with all this bad stuff that people are directing at me, just to keep, my most fundamental basic projects together, which are right now just about in the same primitive level as Faraday and Maxwell. I'm not in a position to do much of anything right now other than, just keep my nose above water.
Yeah, so I think the idea that any of us are going to be producing kits, for hobbyists is probably very low. And the information on how to do it is in the process of being published with some of the books that Eric's talking about. And
well, there's the Borderland videos too that actually show.
They actually show the systems, right? So you'll just have to learn it from those things and start your research from there. So we really can't promise the production of a kit at any time in the future.
Okay. Here's a question from Ted Stoltenberg. Would Professor Dollard have use of a Hewlett-Packard spectrum analyzer circa 1980s? Has crystal time base stabilized in its own oven?
If it works.
Okay. So you might be offering to donate that to your lab or something.
Yeah, I mean, if it works, that would be. I prefer the older vacuum tube stuff, but I mean, I do need a spectrum analyzer that works. I tend to stay away from the more modern equipment because when something goes wrong with it, it's not repairable or it's too difficult to figure out what's wrong with it.
Okay.
Right, all the microcircuits.
Yeah, it just gets to a point where, you know, I mean, it's not practical. A lot of the complicated stuff I don't really need. I'm looking for more basic stuff, but nevertheless, I do need to get spectral analysis equipment for my waveform studies, and a lot of my research is involving music. That was my intent, actually, when I got started in the laboratory situation, is I was going to spend more time with the Pythagorean and the musical waveforms and those type of things, and not get involved in a bunch of other stuff that, you know, wanted to expand out. I don't even know what any of it means right now. What's going out in my name.
Okay. So, Ted, you can probably make contact through the forum. Just post something in the Eric Dollard thread, or
yeah, there's people there that'll, you know, you mentioned the analog computers or any of that stuff. I mean, there's people in the energetic forum that might not be posting, but they are working on it. And if you ask for help, I'm sure somebody will show up to help you.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. Do you want to do a few more questions?
Yeah, just a few more technicals, and then we'll move into the other stuff.
Okay, this is a question from Roger DeWitt. In Tesla patent number 723188, the title is Method of Signaling. Is the method of signaling patent really the flying saucer patent, given that the two antennas share common hardwire connections?
Well, there's nothing there that I know that connects to any flying saucers.
Yeah, the method of signaling patents show basically a ground propagation system. They show his mechanical PWM controllers. They show those types of components. So I don't know what you're talking about there.
Okay, let's see.
It's a long one.
Yeah. Let's see. Is there? Okay, this is a question from Jeff Habel or Habel. It's good to see you two working again together. I hope you're well. Is there a specific book or source of information for understanding some of Tesla's work, such as his transformer?
Not really, other than what little I've put out. It's one of the most, it's one of the least understood devices in existence, and one of the most misrepresented. And pretty much you can rest assured that anything that's written or available on that subject is going to be misleading. Unfortunately, it's all wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a number of people. There's a guy in Europe who's claiming to have the wireless system.
Mile character.
Yeah,
it's got everything all screwed up.
Yeah, that's not how Tesla did it. There's a whole bunch of different things. There's a number of threads on the energetic forum where people are talking about the Tesla magnifying transmitter, and again, various people, including myself, have gone in there and shown the original article on by Tesla, where he shows that that really what's being propagated is a pressure wave. He shows that the transmission is a pump, and the Earth is a ball, and all the receivers are pressure gauges, really. And so every time he pumps the pump, every pressure gauge goes like this, and it's an instantaneous wave propagation through the Earth. He's very, very clear about it. All of the analogies he used.
Yeah, that brings up an important part. Is people are always going faster than light waves and speed and all that. But the important thing to understand with Marconi and Alexanderson and Tesla's work, and that might be why there's so much opposition and suppression of all that work, is there is no velocity to the waves.
It's instantaneous.
Well, it's not instantaneous.
No.
There's no velocity.
Okay.
It's in another dimensional relationship that's not understood. It's not velocity. It tricks you into being velocity. So Tesla points out in his diagram where he shows this, the Earth is a balloon and all these things, and he shows it as the velocity is different in different places. So it's infinite in one spot and the speed of light at the other, which means that there is no real velocity. That's what I wrote about analytically in the RCA book. It's not length divided by time, it's length multiplied by time. So now you've got a whole different dimensional relationship that no longer relates to speed, and that's the complication. So we can't say faster than light communications. We can say it's not a communications that involves velocity, but there's going to be an expected time shift. None of these things are being studied.
Right.
Okay. Here's a question from Sterling Allen. It seems that this forum of questions and Q&A is very helpful for people. Would you consider doing this on a weekly basis or at least a monthly basis?
Well, I mean, this is not my normal habitat. So, once I go back in the bushes, it's pretty much just what I write. But I could try to do this again, but it's not economical for me, to travel a great distance and then.
Yeah.
And I can answer.
Yeah, Eric basically lives 500 miles from here, so this is So
I can answer.
Sure.
Okay. To do this video, Eric doesn't even own a computer down at his lab or anywhere else, and so he's just up here in town for a short period of time. That's why we're able to do the live video interview. When he is back down south, we might be able to do this over a conference call. Where you can dial in with a PIN code and.
Well, that worked because we did that not too long ago.
Yeah, and so people can ask questions and we can unmute it and ask questions. People can ask questions and stuff. It won't be by video setting, but that is something that we could do long distance when Eric is not here. It just won't be by video. It'll just be over a phone call. So
yeah, we could do that once a month.
So something like that once a month we can, I guess, look at doing that. So
it's a good idea.
Okay. Any other technical questions? There's like hours worth.
Yeah. One, thank you so much, everybody, for your interest and your participation in this. We've been going for about an hour now on the technical information, and we really appreciate your interest and support. There is another topic we wanted to touch on a little bit, and that is a lot of the other emails and videos and allegations and disruptions that have been happening over the last 30 days. And we wanted to address that a little bit as well. The first thing I wanted to say is that all of the allegations that have been made against Eric and Aaron at this point have been demonstrated to be false. They have done some damage, but basically we really appreciate your support and your ability to see through all of the lies and the disruptions that have been generated around the situation. You can see here in this format, Eric is here on his own free will. He's healthy. He's lucid. So all of the allegations that he's whacked out on drugs and all kinds of other things. These things have been completely debunked by the people closest to the person who was making those allegations. And just so you can see with your own eyes and hear with your own ears that that is not the state that Eric is in. And so we've put a lot of that information in previous videos that are on YouTube right now, and links to those if you haven't seen them, or if you're continuing to be interested, or if you want to just ignore them, that's fine too, because it's really a distraction for Eric doing his work. But all of the links for those can be found at the new website, ericpdollard.com. and that will be the new central website that will be hosted by us. So that, and at this point, we're trusted supporters of Eric, and we're not going to be answering emails in Eric's name, and we're not going to be doing all of these other things that have been done to really destroy Eric's reputation, and just a vast number of things have happened that Eric didn't know anything about, and we're done in Eric's name, and we're doing everything we possibly can to put a stop to all of those things. So ericpdollard.com will have links to all of those things. That will have a link to this interview as soon as it's the recording is made available and processed. And also there is going to be a link at that website for you to purchase a copy of Eric's lecture at the conference, where Eric will get the largest amount of the proceeds from that if you buy it from that link. So we're hoping that instead of asking for donations and begging for money and all these other things, what we want to do is we want you to learn as you help. And so we're making these materials available. And so the first thing you can do that will really be of assistance to us is if you buy a copy of the lecture that Eric gave at the conference from the link that's available at ericpdollard.com. So.
Yeah, and if anybody does want to send donations directly to Eric, by cash, check, money order, or whatever, there is an address on ericpdollard.com, and that gets straight to Eric. And occasionally he'll check that mail, and so that goes directly to him. And that money will go to his personal use to help him out, and he will also use that money to support the projects at the lab,
Right.
which is going forward.
Right, the lab is moving forward. Most of the people who have been trying to disrupt those activities are becoming marginalized and will hopefully be permanently relieved of their interaction with the laboratory so that Eric's work can continue without disruption. And so all of those things are in the works. We really, really appreciate any of your help to make the ericpdollard.com site go viral. So tell your friends about it, and and feel free to support Eric in that way, and because we want to support you as well by helping you understand what's going on in this field, and so we can take some questions at this time. Yeah.
Okay. And there's not a whole lot regarding the stuff that's
Right.
going on, but here's one from Sterling Allen.
Okay.
My main question is, okay, dusting off from the recent fallout of recent conflicts, is Eric going to somehow resume work at EPD Labs?
Well, that's what I'm trying to do.
The building and that process is still being sorted out, and we really have to see whether or not sufficient funds can be brought together to buy out the previous partners. There's obviously a fair amount of there's some debt associated with the building. There's some other costs associated with some material upgrades to the facility, and if the people who put in those funds could be compensated, then they would step out. So that's probably the greatest thing that could be of help if sufficient funds could be generated in the next 6 months to facilitate that, then that would probably clear the way completely for Eric to work undisturbed at the lab.
Yeah, and there will probably be some campaigns like an Indiegogo kind of thing to continue this. And with anything dealing with the lab, we really don't have any part in any of that, and that's between Eric and the people he's working with in the nonprofit.
Right. Yeah. Aaron and I are not involved in the lab process. We're just functioning as Eric's publishers, but.
So that's why I should point out. That's why there's all this trouble right now. This has happened repeatedly, as is known. It's always set up that I'm the fall guy. I'm some drug user crazy that does whatever. And then they get all my stuff and they defame my name, and normally I have no recourse, I have no money, I'm left destitute somewhere on the street, and nobody will help me. This time it worked out a little differently. This plan to basically do this again to me was oddly enough disclosed to somebody, not realizing that somebody had more intelligence than they were given credit for. And then at the same time, I got associated here with Aaron. And right now, a lot of my suppressed material, I mean, we're still going through stuff that we dug up that has been banned or suppressed or screwed with for some of it almost 20 years. And now all that's getting out, and I have a bit of a defense force. And these forces that want to disrupt all of my work are in high gear right now. They weren't expecting this. They thought I was just going to go away. They had worked my intelligence gathering. They had worked for months to compile defamatory letters to send officials I work with and my business partners, and the whole thing went wrong. And now these people are just going to go full bore on the internet to cook up whatever they can. But it seems to me, basically, they're just showing their own colors of what kind of people they are. They're outrageous. The sad thing is how many small-minded people there are out there that just get wrapped up in the whole thing without even knowing what's going on. It's enough to make me go drive off in the bushes and never talk to anybody again. And that's exactly what these people are trying to do.
So so that's what we're up against, folks. We're really asking you to take a breath and look at whose actions are really supporting Eric and whose actions are really defaming and disrupting Eric. And if you just look at things that way, then I think you'll see the truth very in a very simple dimension.
See, and the problem is when this future material we've been talking about comes out, this is going to get stepped way up. It's going to start coming out of other neighborhoods, so it's important the public see on this first wave what's going on, because there's going to be a second wave that's going to be even more severe. And it's time to start paying attention to this stuff. This time now, the defamation and destruction of Eric Dollard and his work will be live for everybody to see. I feel satisfied in that.
And there's 2 interviews on YouTube that I did
Right.
with Eric. The links to those are on ericpdollard.com, which
Right.
addresses one particular individual, and another one addresses these false copyright, claiming that these copyright claims are false.
Right.
Eric did request that I had his copyrighted material removed off of certain websites, and this person is making it look like I'm filing these in Eric's name without Eric knowing that they're false. Not only did that material not remain taken down, but it was put back up, and that individual is encouraging other people to break the law and spread it around. And so that's the kind of stuff we're dealing with, but anybody can feel free to go to ericpdollard.com, look at those 2 YouTube links, and all that stuff has been addressed, and it doesn't have to be discussed again.
Yeah, we don't want to go over things that have already been put in a very clear communication, and just realize that anything that's come out from these sources is what Eric wants done, and he's the one who is the driving force here. All Aaron and I are trying to do is play a supporting role.
Here's a question from Damian Meeker. I donated some money the last day of the conference to the lab. Are the donations lost now that the officers of the corporation are changing?
The bank account should still be intact.
But
I don't know. I've lost control of all this, so I don't know what's going on. I have to. That's why it's best at this point just to send the money to me in the mail.
And the address is on ericpdollar.com.
Right. So unfortunately, we don't know the answer to that question, and that's why we are instituting alternate channels at this point for those people who want to continue support.
Okay. Here's a question from Jason Poteet. What's the purpose of the lab? I'm missing context since I wasn't able to attend the conference.
Well, the purpose of the lab was never even supposed to be made public. So that's a complication. There's projects that I'm working on that I consider confidential. A lot of it involves this telluric work. There's things that just can't be made public. Now that whole security situation has been crashed. The public's interest and stock in the lab is to build this 20,000 watt peak envelope power cosmic induction generator that'll make anything that Hollywood cooked up look pale in comparison to. But that's a lengthy, expensive project. And unfortunately, all this disruption is a large quantity of donations that were to be provided and equipment for that have now been canceled. So that put a stop to that. The private donations that I'm receiving from people in the mail right now are paying for the telluric project, which is slowly and methodically moving forward. It has the appropriate governmental support. I have the financial support from the public. The materials are all available. There's not really a lot. It's just wire and insulators and wooden poles. It's a lot of work involved, but the technology is basic and simple. This stuff is just laying as junk out in the desert, and that project is moving forward. Right now, we're just basically waiting out the heat. So when it cools off, we can go back out there and start working in the field again. That project is advancing very well, and the public support money is really appreciative that is funding this project, and now that's a self-contained operation that ultimately I can do without the building on that because most of it's outside plant. But that means I'll have to do the whole thing out of my car in the desert like I have for the past 30 years, and I would like to make it a little easier than that because I'm not really going to live long enough to spend another 30 years building equipment. I got to get it all done in a short period of time.
Okay. Okay, here's a question from Gary Hendershot. Given that the principal fundraiser is now persona non grata, and revenue from publications and speaking engagements have been diverted to personal use, what method of continued financial support do you envision for the continued operation of EPD Labs? Are there any projects planned for the near term that might generate a revenue stream to support the continued operation at the lab?
There are certain projects that could be developed. One thing is I put these projects out on the energetic forum, particularly two of them relating to the duplication of Tesla's work. I had the idea of this thing that I called the cosmic ray detector is actually making them and making them available to the public. The problem is the parts are getting hard to find, and I can't really use up all the available resources and send them out for money or not, because then there won't be anything left for me to do my experiments with. So it's kind of hard to say. Like I say, the laboratory was mainly conceived as myself as a reestablishment of a Bell Telephone Laboratories presence, consisting primarily of a board of directors and individuals with some kind of Bell Telephone background or experience. And then there's, in the area I'm in, there's various industrial and military and governmental and commercial interests that, I'm a laboratory and I'm there to do things, and was the intent of EPD Laboratories, was to get involved in that. A big mining company or somebody is not going to want to have all this stuff, broadcast on the air, why it's being developed or whatever. It can't be talked about. The telluric thing, I can't, just get on the air and play Chicken Little and wave my hands and say the earthquake's coming, the earthquake's coming. That's not the right way to do business. It's a civil defense thing. It's specifically for the utility companies and fire departments and emergency services people. So EPD Laboratories really is not a Disneyland presentation of electricity, but being that the public has provided a large quantity of money and seems to continue to like the idea, the so-called cosmic induction generator is a direction to go. It's very expensive and time-consuming. It's important to do, and the public is owed that. And I think that's going to be the public side of EPD Laboratories, and then possibly later, time and people and materials permitting, is then these things that people are asking about analog computers and start to do a thing again like with the old Borderland videos. So that's a distinct possibility, so that there's a public service aspect, media aspect of this, as well as its actual laboratory, situation that has to operate in that reality, which might not necessarily involve any public disclosure. And obviously, from everything that's happened, being tricked into these videos and stuff is public disclosure. Ultimately, is a very deleterious situation for my operating. So I'm tending not to be interested in much of that anymore. So it's a complex situation. Really, it's hard to give a definite answer to.
I think the bottom line is that the problem isn't the funding source as far as EPD Labs, because there is so much interest in the community from professional clientele that as soon as all of the problems and disruptions go away, EPD Labs can easily settle down into a very stable business interaction with the people who are wanting to take advantage of Eric's services, and so that's not an issue. The main thing we have to do is stop all the disruption and get people involved in the corporate structure of EPD Labs that are supportive of Eric's agenda.
That's about all the questions as far as the lab stuff and the recent things going on.
Great. We've been going about an hour and a half.
It'll be at 2:30 when the links go live for the new presentation.
Great. We really appreciate all of your interest and support in your participation in this live interview with Eric Dollard. This is really a great opportunity for you to see what's going on, what the truth is, and this broadcast will be made available. Again, the link will be on ericpdollard.com. The link to begin purchasing the conference films, which will consist of 2 1.5-hour downloads. That link will be on ericpdollard.com at 2:30 West Coast time, and that is the complete uncut presentation of Eric giving the lecture. He takes questions during the lecture. He takes a lot of questions after he finishes his prepared comments, and everything is there. We didn't lose anything, and so we really appreciate your support. This film set is definitely the beginning of the understanding of the material that's in the book. We really hope to have that book fully developed at the publisher level and available by the end of the summer, maybe possibly as late as early fall of this year. So we're going to be getting that out as soon as possible, and we'll probably have 2 other publications by Eric made available in that time frame that are in post-production right now. So we hope to be able to create a steady stream of the best work of this guy for the last 5 years, and make it available in easy to get, highly condensed and well presented form, so that you can learn this science as quickly and as correctly as possible. Any closing comments, anyone?
Okay, this is Aaron, everybody. This is the first time I've used this GoToMeeting system. I'll do my best to see if this recorded properly with video and audio. If you happen to have recorded this by video or audio, and you have a good copy of it, please get in touch with me through Energetic Forum or email me at info@emediapress.com. And it would be helpful if somebody did make a good recording, because I don't know what my recordings are going to look like yet.
Right.
So that would be much appreciated.
Great. So again, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Eric, for making the insane 4-day drive trip to get up here, and for sharing everything with.
Well, I enjoy it, so and I think everybody else does. So it's good.
Good.
And one last message: there's a Facebook group set up using Eric's name. If you see those posts coming from Eric, it is not Eric.
No, I don't subscribe to Facebooks or emails or any of that stuff. I'm absolutely against it. Cellular telephones, the whole thing.
Right.
The fact that you even have the coyote in a cage this long is a miracle.
So yes, that's the other thing we wanted to say is that Eric does not have an email address. He does not have a computer that's on the internet. He does not have a Facebook account. Any of these things. So if you see anybody who is representing themselves as Eric in these venues, please let us know about it. Contact Aaron at info@emediapress.com, and we'll just add these insults to the lawsuit that's possibly being developed against these people. So thank you again for participating, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Would it be? Has it been so far? Great. That can be questioned.
Yeah, so far it's been used as in a very superficial way to power up convenience, and as long as people pay the power bill and enjoy the convenience, then the power company really isn't interested in us knowing anything more about it.
Yeah, and also the engineering is getting real sloppy and dangerous, because the original knowledge and understandings and workmanship are all disappearing. So it's just like we were discussing earlier about the interference and all that, is the system's becoming basically out of control.
And
no one really understands how to put these things together anymore, or how to configure the transformers, or the safety requirements is all gone. So basically, from the sociological standpoint, what I'm presenting here and talking and write about is actually no interest whatsoever to society.
Yeah, and that's a dangerous condition we're in. Would you not say?
Yes.
Yes. Sometimes you head for the hills.
Yeah, when you start analyzing waveforms and signals like I do, and see what's going on inside the Earth, you find out that there's this large body of electricity that's becoming more and more out of control inside the Earth from all these aberrant power systems that are going into construction and installation, and it's a danger to the public.
So let's go back to the roots of all this. You were saying in your lecture that Tesla's vision of the real way of producing and transmitting electricity down wires was a 4-pole system, not a 3-phase system.
He originally started off 4-phase, but then a special transformer bank was developed to go from this 4-phase system to 3-phase for long-distance transmission because it utilized less metal.
Just less wires. It's just an excellent place for almost anybody with any interest in the topic to start. It's pretty much what will be covered in the book, but less. There's a lot less of the math and a lot less of the technical details of that. So Eric has produced a tremendous kind of overview for the general audience on the nature of electricity and its deep roots in the natural world, and how all of the people who were really involved at the beginning of this, these people didn't think of themselves as scientists as much as just discoverers of natural principles and natural philosophers and these types of things back in the 1800s. The idea of being a scientist was not really an interesting idea. And studying how nature behaved and even understanding the underlying philosophy of nature, which is where you get the idea of being a natural philosopher, that was like the pinnacle of knowledge. If you really understood not only what nature did, but how nature did it and why nature did it, then you really understood the philosophy of nature. And this is where all of these astonishing people like Tesla and J.J. Thomson and Charles Steinmetz and others, they really kind of teased the truth out of these hidden corners of behavior, because electricity as we use it today is not actually found in nature, other than it's inherently available, but it never shows up quite this way. That's pretty much right, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's Tesla kind of considered it an unnatural form.
An unnatural form?
Yeah, unnatural form, but this is what we got.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not to say that there aren't other possibilities or things to be discovered in electricity.
Right.
So that's why Tesla came up with that remark, is when that understanding was achieved, then it would be a great thing for mankind. But then how electricity operated in these systems. And he and I were having a little conversation a while ago, and I brought up the quote by Tesla from 1893, where he said that he believed that it would be the greatest day in human history when we actually understood what electricity is. And certainly he was on the quest for that discovery, and a lot of other people were. And can you just make a few comments about that situation and where we are with using electricity today? Obviously, electricity isn't electrons moving down wires. Well, nobody really cares what electricity is anymore or wants to study it. So corporations and the industry got what they wanted out of it, so now it's kind of just all abandoned. So what I'm trying to do is to pick up the pieces and get interest in electrical science going again. Of course, Tesla's the center of all this. But you can't just say that Tesla came up with this and that. In Tesla's day, it was a whole movement that was started by Michael Faraday many decades before Tesla even got started on this. And in Tesla's day, it was you had J.J. Thomson
exactly.
and other lesser-known people that were all writing papers on this and doing experiments, and gave us basically all the science and technology we have today. But its origins are all forgotten, and its way of presentation and development has all been debased and perverted. So my aim is to bring everything back to the original point again. Electricity has specific geometric patterns and things that can be very easily understood. So my lecture was to try to get that idea across to people that don't really know a lot about electricity, by explaining it in analogs and archetypes and things like that, and getting very heavy into the history of where all this came from.
Right, so the lecture is really, okay. Welcome to the Eric Dollard live interview today. This is a production of A&P Electronic Media. My name is Peter Lindemann, and I'll be the interviewer and host today for today's telecast. The first thing we'd like to do, because there's sometimes a lot of problems with these systems, this is the first time we're using GoToMeeting. If you can see the image and if you can hear my voice clearly without echoes or anything else, if you would just put a little note in the chat and let us know if you're having any problems. If you're not having any problems, if you can see everything clearly, and if you can hear my voice without echo, then please don't make a comment. And so what we'll try and do is work out the technical problems as best we can early. So in the meantime, I would like to just give you a little bit of an outline of what we're hoping to accomplish today. First of all, we will be talking about Eric's recent conference lecture at the Bedini Lindemann Science and Technology Conference approximately 1 month ago. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that, and that lecture's relationship to a new book that Eric has developed, which is the complete communication on that subject matter. So we'll be talking a little bit about those things, and we'll be taking questions on the content of the lecture as well. We'd also like to address some of the other recent allegations and controversies that have been swarming around in the last month, and just let you know where you can find the information on all of these things. And if you have any questions or if you have any doubts about what the reality of that situation is, or you can put a question in the chat, and you can have Eric answer your question directly so that your mind can be put at ease as to what the real situation is. So I'd like to introduce Eric. He's obviously the honored guest of this interview. And also here handling all the technicals in the background is Aaron Murakami. And so we're about ready to begin. So Aaron, are there any problems with the technical that people are asking about?
No, everybody's saying that they can hear it loud and clear. Video's coming through okay, and so also, if they want to raise their hands when you do open up for questions, they can also ask by audio.
Okay.
You know, one at a time.
Right. So here's the situation we have. If you have an audio feed for your computer, what we can do is if you put a question in the chat, and we think it's a good question that everybody would be interested in the answer to, you can just raise your hand in the chat, and then we can turn on your microphone so that you can actually ask the question in an audio form live on this webinar. So the first thing I'd like to start the interview. The conference was a really amazing experience for those who were there, and the final presentation was Eric speaking for almost 3 hours on the topic of 4-quadrant representation of electricity. And this goes back to Tesla's original conception of